What's up YouTube? It's Todd Horst here with Tasty Tracker, and today I wanted to do a video on covered calls and why I hate them. Hopefully at the end of the video you'll understand what a covered call is and how to open one up, and you'll take some of my opinions away. Maybe that will influence you a little bit to determine whether it makes sense in your account or not. Okay, so what I'm going to cover is entering and exiting, what the wheel is. It's synonym sort of to covered calls, but it also involves cash secured covered puts. What the risks are, who it makes sense for, why I hate them, some recommendations, some conclusion, real world example of one I have on right now, and some potential ones that you could enter yourself. Okay, so getting started, you'll want to watch the Options 101 video I created. That's number 16. That will give you all the background on calls and puts, what they are, and what it means to sell to open an option. Those are the fundamentals that you need to know before you get into doing a covered call. Because the covered calls involve stock, this is very commonly the entry point into the options world for a lot of people. So it's sort of where everybody gets started and where they have the most questions. And actually, I think the combination of the stock and the options actually muddies the waters a little bit, makes it harder to understand all of the different gyrations, all of the different facets of options when you involve stock. To me, it just made it more complex to understand. This actually isn't how I started, because I started with a small account and grew from there. So I didn't have enough money to buy 100 shares of stocks that I was interested in. Of course, I could have bought some penny stock, but generally I didn't get started with penny stocks either. So yeah. So anyway, one of the things, the rigid rules are enticing. The simplicity of it seems attractive. So there's a lot of things, especially on the surface, that coming from buying and selling shares of a stock seem attractive about doing covered calls. It's a way to make some extra money potentially on top of the stocks that you're owning. So how you would enter it, it's easiest or best to enter a covered call all in one transaction. Depending on your broker, that might not be possible. I use Tasty Tracker, links in the description, but basically you go into the options trading tab and you select a covered call, and it will automatically get you 100 shares and then allow you to pick which strike you want for the call. So doing that, it will link those two together, and it makes it easier to see what your max gain and loss are all in one picture. You can certainly do these as two transactions, and most of the time that is the case, where you'll have the stock first and then you'll be selling the call on top of it. But it's just a little bit easier. If you know you want to enter a covered call to begin with, you might as well just do it all in one transaction. So what it looks like is you own 100 shares of a stock. I'm going to be using the Veri example in a minute here. So I already owned 100 shares of Veri. And so then what you want to do is sell an out of the money call. And normally you would need to have enough cash if you were selling a naked call to cover if the stock were to go up. But in this case, we're using the stocks that we already own as the collateral. So we don't need to have any extra cash on hand, which is great. So if you already own the shares, you can sell the call, and your account, you don't need to deposit any money in your account. And in fact, you get some cash back because of the premium that you've collected for selling that call. Okay, so on to my Veri example. I owned 100 shares of Veri. I bought those at a 1203 cost basis, and I sold the 1250 calls, one call, because I only have 100 shares, and one option, as I covered in the 101 video, covers 100 shares. So that was for August expiration, and I collected $1.81 premium. So you can either think of that as $181 total cash that I was paid, or you can think of it as $1.81 per share. And since there's 100 shares, that's why you multiply those two together. So when you take the 1203 that I originally purchased it for, subtract the $1.81 premium that I collected for selling the call, that brings my total cost basis down to 1022. Today the stock is trading at 1151. So had I not done this covered call, I would actually be down $52 today on that position or so. But with the move down, the call that I sold is now worth less. I sold it for 181 and it's now worth 114. So actually, with the move down, I'm actually positive to sort of a wash. I lost 52 on the stock, but I gained 67 on the option. So I call that a wash, where I'm basically break even, which really helps out instead of being down $52. That's nice, isn't it? Okay, so closing. You can close early if you want to. Normally, when I'm selling options, that's the main, I sell put spreads primarily most of the time. And normally I want to close those at 50%, and I want to close those after 10 or 15 days from when I open the position, and there'll still be 30 or 40 days left before expiration. So I close that position way ahead of time. You can do that here. However, since you really get the most theta degradation at the end, you can there's usually less benefit to closing early. You can just hold it through expiration with the hopes that it will expire worthless. The whole point was that you sold the call out of the money above your cost basis, and so you're expecting the stock to be down here, and since it will never, in your head, never make it up here, this will be out of the money and expire for $0 and close automatically, and you'll get to keep all that premium that you collected. Okay, so you want to use theta as your advantage, as I said, and there's minimal risk if you are a long-term holder, and we'll get into that more in a minute. You might want to close early, though, if there was a strong and sudden drop. So say you own the stock and then a week later it drops $10 or something like that. You might want to roll your strikes down, since it's not going to come up to your position, and that call that you sold will have decreased in value a lot. You can now buy that back to close it, and then sell another lower strike to collect even more premium for that same expiration. You can't have two calls sold because you only have 100 shares, but if you close the first one and then open up a new position, that's a way you can get more premium. Of course, you want to be careful that the strike that you're selling now is still above your cost basis. Preferably, it's just a couple strikes closer, but still pretty far out of the money and above your cost basis. Okay. You hold until expiration. If the stock is lower than your strike at the time, you'll keep all the premium in stock. I already said that. So if your option expires worthless, you keep your stock, you keep the premium. It's like it never happened, but you just reduced your cost basis. If the stock goes higher than your strike, then those shares that you own get called away, but you still keep the premium, and any profit between the cost basis and your strike is profit you take. So for the example that I had before for Very, since my cost basis was 1203, if say the stock went up to $13, I would get 47 cents profit per share plus the 181 per share. And so, what is that, 220, something like that, profit per share times 100. So I would walk away with around $220. Now there's going to be some assignment and exercise fees that Tastyworks has. So if you're using a broker like Robinhood, that's really nice because they don't have those fees associated, which are more than your standard transaction fees. Tastyworks is like a buck to open per leg, and then assignment is like $5. So you can definitely save some money if you're doing the covered calls and wheels in a Robinhood account or some other free account. Okay. So the downside here is that, like I said, if it went up to 13, I'm only getting gains to $12.50. That extra 50 cents between $12.50 and $13, I missed out on because the option that I sold, the leg that I sold, is for $12.50. So that is the downside. But that's a good downside to have, where if the stock blows past your strike that you sold, you still make money, you're still profitable, but then that stock gets called away from you. That's actually best case scenario. Let's move on. So what is the wheel? The wheel is where you start off by selling a put, and that's a cash secured put, which means you have enough cash collateral in your account to buy those 100 shares of stock. And you're doing this with the anticipation that you're going to get assigned those shares. So in my very example, let's do this. I bought it for $12.03 outright. It might have been better to sell the $10 puts, and then I would have only had to outlay $1,000 instead of $1,200 like I did. And then what happens there is if the put expires worthless, that means the, let's go back to the slide. Let me stick to my bullet points. Cash secured simply means that you are selling a naked put using cash as collateral like you normally would. Yeah, right here I have it. So I would have had to have $1,000 collateral in my account, but then I actually, if I do it all as one position, I don't even need that much because they automatically subtract the premium I collected. So say I got $1 premium for that, then I would have only needed $900 in my account to open that up. So if the stock is under $10, I get assigned because I sold the $10 strike, and I have to buy the 100 shares for $10, even though, say, it's trading at $9. So you could say that's sort of a loss, but at the same time, it's a stock that I wanted to own. I collected premium, and I'm still getting it at $10 compared to what it was to when I originally put the trade on, which it was trading at the time for $12. I hope that made sense. So at the time I put the trade on, Veri was trading at 12. I sold the $10 strike put. In the meantime, Veri went down, and so then I had that premium that I collected, and I bought the shares then at $10, even though they're technically trading at $9, we'll say at this point. But if you imagine that I bought them at 12, I would be way more in the hole than if I bought them at 10 plus the premium. So it's actually, like I said, if I collected $1 for that, then my cost basis would be $9. So I'd be almost break even if it was trading at 9. Once you get assigned the shares, then you sell the call, and you're flipping hats to the covered call. So then you just go back and forth, and that's why it's called a wheel, because you're just going around and around and around. You go from having 100 shares of stock and selling the call to getting those called away to then selling the put and having no shares and then getting assigned and then going back to the covered call. There's a link below. I'll put it in the description. And they suggest having 2 going on at once, with the idea being that you have a covered call with 100 shares. And so you sell your call up here, and then you sell a put down here to get your next set of shares. And so basically the stock obviously can only move in one direction. And so if it's up here, then your put would win, and if it's down here, then your call would win. So you kind of make it a win-win situation where the direction no longer matters. Of course, that sort of falls apart once you get assigned on 2, and then you have 200 shares. But anyway, I'll put that link in the description. Okay, so everything has its risk. Everything is a risk reward. You're weighing this versus that. There's opportunity cost, etc. What are the risks associated with opening up a covered call? If you enter it with the correct mindset, there's absolutely no risk. So mind blown, you're excited now, and this seems like a great deal. It's a win-win. There's no way to lose. Not so fast. My key words were there, if you're entering it with the correct mindset. So if you're anticipating holding the stock long term and you're selling the calls above your cost basis, and you're only doing it as a means to reduce cost or generate some additional income in the short term, but you have no intention of getting rid of that stock long term, then you can't lose, because you're just going to collect that extra premium. And if the stock were to go down, you would have accepted that anyway. So it's really no harm, because you were just going to hold on to it through any dips that it has. If you're entering a covered call as a means to make crazy money, no downside, super stable, you can definitely just scratch this off the list and look elsewhere. The ROI, in my opinion, is terrible. There's a lot of funkiness where maybe a pure simple option where you have either 2 legs or 1 leg in your strategy makes it much easier to roll and manage that position. When you have stock getting involved, now you have to consider, you have to close out your option position before you can sell your stock if you want to. So if you're planning on touching the stock, it's not really a great idea to enter in a covered call, especially if it's a longer term covered call. If you're doing maybe like a 2-week expiration or something like that, just to collect a couple more bucks, whatever. But anyway, I'll go on. So if you sell a call below your cost basis, you could potentially be locking in a loss. And this is more common than what people think about. So say you own AMD at $50 and now it drops down to $30. You could sell the 55 strikes, the 55 call, but you're not going to collect that much money because it's so far out of the money. So you're going to be tempted to sell the $40 call. But if for some reason AMD now goes up to 45 and you get those shares taken away, you're forced to sell them at 45. Your cost basis was 50, so you just lost $5 on each one of the shares. So there's can be a lot of waiting involved if you're waiting for the stock to sort of recover. And then you're kind of stuck in no man's land where you think the stock's going to go higher and you need it to go higher, but then if it does go higher, you want to sell a call and then you sort of want it to stick there. So it's like, well, what do you want? Do you want the stock to go up, or are you hoping for the stock to stay flat? So there's a lot of waiting, and I guess the clear rules to me aren't so clear when you start to put it into practice. Just my opinion. Okay. The other thing is, not only could you have locked in a loss, but if the stock moons, then it shoots up to the moon, you're going to miss out on some of those gains. You will get some, because ideally you're selling the strike out of money, a couple strikes up, couple dollars up from where the stock is trading at, where your cost basis is. So you'll make some money on those couple dollars plus the premium you collected. But then on the flip side, if the stock drops significantly and never recovers, so think about any stock that's, let's go over here, and it's just gradually going down and down and down over time, which, how many stocks have you seen that are like that? If the stock drops and never recovers, you'll get that premium that you initially collected, but any future calls that you try to sell are only going to be a couple bucks and not really worth it. They're not going to make any dent meaningful dent. If you're selling a call for $20, that's 20 cents off of your call spaces, which is nice. But if it's if your call spaces is $75, 20 cents isn't. It's going to take a while to have any effect on your call spaces. So what I'm saying here is, don't cover your stock for the fun of it. Cover it because you like the stock and you want to reduce your cost basis, and you're okay capping your gains. So sort of on the same note there, if you're a longer term holder of a stock and you want to lower your basis, the premium collected will help you earn money from nothing, since you don't need any additional collateral. So that is definitely attractive. You already have that money invested, so you might as well make as much money from that money as you can. If your stock is expected to be flat for the next couple months, maybe it just had a nice move up, and the way that stock behaves is that it has a leg up and then it's flat for several months. A lot of stocks do that. So that might be a good time to sell a covered call, but not be in a covered call position repeatedly. It's just for that month or two where you're expecting to have sideways action. If there's a spike and a new high, which is kind of what I just described, you can expect a lot of sideways action and a little bit of a decline in the stock. So yeah, legs up, and every reaction is an overreaction. So it goes pretty high, and then it will gradually stay flat to sort of degrade over time. So because of that jump up, a lot of times premiums will jump up. The IV should be a little bit higher, and so you can sell calls at that point and collect a little bit more than what you would get normally. And then the bag holders who are expecting it to continue to go crazy will grab up your call, so you'll be able to get rid of it pretty quickly. So yeah, that's when it would, in my opinion, when it makes sense. Okay, so whole point here is why I hate them. Hopefully you were anxious to get to this point. So owning stock is an incredible waste of money. I'm not saying you shouldn't ever do it. I have an IRA, I have a 401k, and I let those accounts that are managed by other people, which are enough for me to retire on, own stocks and equities, ETFs, etc. But in my own trading account, it's inefficient. So Apple, as we know, is trading around 400 at the moment, which would mean to own 1,000 shares, we would need $40,000. That's crazy to tie that much money up in one stock. And then if I were to sell the 410 calls for September, that would get you around $6.30 per share, which is great. That's a lot of premium. So that would bring our effective cost basis, say we had bought them at 400, that would bring it down to 394 or something like that. So it put a decent dent on our cost basis, and we have the room from 394 the whole way up to 410. That would all be profit if, say, Apple goes to 415. So we actually want Apple to go to 415 and then close out and grab all of that profit. But let's ignore doing a cover call. Let's just do a put spread, sell that, which would be a bullish position. So both stock and a put spread, credit spread, those are both bullish because we want the stock to go up. Let's say we bought the 360 put and we sold the 370 put. So that's just a standard put credit vertical. You would get, just today, these are fresh numbers, you would get $347 credit, and you would be risking $653 since that's $10 wide. The total there would be $1,000, and since $347 is the credit, $653 is the collateral. So if we had two of those positions, that would increase it to $694 would be the credit, and then $1,306 would be the collateral. So at this point, you have $1,300 invested, and you could make $694 if you were to hold the whole way to expiration and Apple closes above 370. Again, remember our hypothetical before was that we bought stock and had a cost basis of 400. So it can come down $30, and uh, and we could still be profitable on this options play. Okay, but if if it does close above 370, then we've made 694, whereas in the covered call we only made $630. So we're making $60 more and only risking $1,000, $1,300 instead of $40,000. That's crazy. So you could obviously for $40,000 you could do uh, 20 times what I'm saying here. So this is a 60% chance of success play, which is pretty much my typical. But you could choose safer options and get less premium, or you could have two for the strikes that I chose, and then do another two at some lower strikes, and then another two at lower strikes. So you could spread out what options you're selling. So you have the 360, 370, then you have the 340, 350, and then you have the 320, 330, something like that. And you could spread out if you're planning on, if you want to make sure that you're profitable, you could have way less invested and still make out much better. So if you can't afford these good stocks like Apple, well, then what are you going to wheel or sell covered calls on? You would be doing these on penny stocks. And obviously with penny stocks, most of them continue to go down in value until they're delisted. So you're never going to make up enough premium by selling covered calls on that to break even on that position. So it's better to just cut your losses and get rid of those penny stocks that are not valuable than trying to sell a covered call. So what I'm saying is you either invest a huge amount of money into something like Apple, or you invest a little bit of money, but it's going to be with a bad company. So neither of those situations is really good in my head. So if you were going to do it, what would you do it on? Well, first of all, obviously you got to choose a stock that you like, and then ideally for cost reasons, it's under $50, which would put it around $5,000, which most people, especially that have been trading for a bit, can afford. Obviously, they should be well known. The bigger the company is, the less likely they are to fail. Ideally, they're flat or slight trend up, but not an exponential trend up. So you don't want something like Shop where it's just going, making crazy gains every single day. If you do that, obviously, and you try to sell a covered call against it, it's going to blow through your strikes, through your strike very quickly. So a slight trend up that you can sort of build that into your choice on which strikes you choose is okay. Obviously, it's got to have liquid options, because if it's all nice to do it on some stock that you believe in, but if nobody's buying and selling those options, then you're not going to get in and out when you need to. So I have a couple examples here. So right now I would sell the September expiration, which is in 51 days. Obviously, my ideal is 45, and that still applies here to covered calls. So AMD is trading around 76, which would be 7,600 is what you would need in your account. Again, that's not too crazy. Of course, if you got a couple weeks ago, it would have been much better, around $50, but you could sell the 85 strike call, which is a 27% chance of being in the money. So again, that's like a 70% chance. These are all around 70% chance of success. And for that, you would collect $282. So again, that if you bought the stock at 76, that's putting you down to around a $73 call spaces, which is nice. Another option for that one would be to sell the 80 strike, which has about a 37% in the money, so only 60% chance of success. But then for that, you get 425. So you have to weigh whether you want to, with it being at 76 and jumping to 80 is more reasonable. It's more likely, a higher chance of that happening. So you have a greater chance of that being called away. So you have to question yourself. If you really want to hold it long term, you probably want to go with the 85. If you are sort of indifferent, but you're okay holding it long term, then go with the 80 and hope that it blows through your strike. Bank of America here is $25. So the problem with this is, even though it's only $2,500 to hold it, which is nice, you could sell the 27 strike. That's only $2 away, which Bank of America doesn't move a huge amount, so it is only 31% chance, but I would be a little bit afraid that it would just go straight through, and you're only getting $60 of credit. So, here again, you're seeing the lower value stocks, you can collect less premium a lot of times, unless there's huge, very high IV or something like that. But yeah, Twitter, you would need about $4,000. You could sell the 40 strike and collect $1.30, which isn't bad. But these are all, well-known companies that have been around forever and been hovering in these price ranges for quite some time. So with the exception of AMD, AMD has been in the $50 range forever, and now it just jumped up to 85. So this would have been great to have AMD a couple weeks ago. Okay, so you do you. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but I would personally rather hold it just in cash or a cash equivalent, which they have some ETFs and stuff like that you can hold if you just want to temporarily. I think it makes sense if you're tempted to invest that, and maybe you would make a bad decision if you were to just open up too many positions. Doing the wheel occupies cash, so I know there are other people on the internet who sell naked puts because they want to have a large amount of collateral eaten up in their account, so they're not tempted to open up too many positions. And so that same thing kind of applies here. Here actually makes more sense to me. If you're tempted by a large amount of money sitting there, then owning the stock and then running the wheel on it makes a lot of sense. But I will say I really want to like covered calls in the wheels strategy. It makes sense on the surface, and it seems very appealing. I just can't justify investing that much money into a stock when I have other accounts that I have investing on, and these accounts that I do these videos on is for trading, not for investing, and I don't want to occupy that much capital. So I think it's better to just hold it in cash, and then you can save it for when opportunities pop up. You can withdraw it and pay yourself. You can invest in real estate. You can pay off debt. But if you insist on holding stock, which again you should in some account, I personally prefer to have all of my accounts separate. So in this account I do this, and in this account I do that. But if you have them all mixed together, then you should be holding stock. And if you insist on holding stock, you might as well make some extra money while you're doing it. So it's good to lock yourself into a position to avoid temptation if you're the type of person that opens up the position and then 2 days later wants to question their decisions. First of all, you need to be doing trading plans and have more confidence in what you're doing and logging everything. But if you're that type of person who can't leave things alone, you have to keep touching it, then covered calls can sort of lock you into that position, and so that can force you to be profitable even if it's not a great profit. It definitely brings stability, and with it lower ROI. That's a common trade-off, but maybe that's what your account needs. If your account's all over the place because you're doing YOLOs and lottery tickets, then you need to add some stability and purchase some stock. Maybe you've got some dividend stocks that you're invested in, and so running the wheel on those definitely makes sense. Okay, so last bullet point here is holding stock is a safer way to stabilize your account than holding 100% allocation in options. Obviously, we know options are leveraged and they're extremely risky. So if you have 100% of your account allocated. I would rather see you put 25, 50, whatever percentage into stocks if you must have it all allocated. Definitely this is an area I struggle with, where I see opportunities everywhere, and so it's hard for me to say no and keep the reserve like I should. So that is one area where I'm considering, if I have a wheel or two out there, then I'm forced to have sort of a buffer that I don't want to touch, and it's more stable. It is limiting my ROI, but at least I know that that money's sort of hands off. Okay, so yeah, I have all the broker links in the description. I'm not sure who. I think somebody signed up with Tastyworks underneath of me, which is using my referral link, which is nice. They sent me a sticker, so that's pretty cool. I wasn't expecting that. But definitely leave a comment and like and subscribe if you're not already. I have lots of videos planned, and Tasty Tracker is free, so it's meant for you to track your options, to learn from others, and yeah, so you can find me there. I post basically daily as I'm trading, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks.